I'm Sally Ann Airy, and welcome to Fearless Forward, the podcast that asks leaders how they've faced their fears. Today I'm in conversation with the co-founder of a wonderful charity whose purpose is to provide a legacy for a very special young woman whose life ended abruptly and tragically, just as she was embarking on a journey that would doubtless have seen her leaving a lasting mark on the world. Olivia Burt is widely remembered for her smile, her kindness, and the way she'd go out of her way to help other people. Growing up in a seaside village in the New Forest area of southern England, she started sailing when she was 5 years old and went on to race internationally for Great Britain. She was also head girl at Bournemouth School for Girls and played a prominent part in the school community. But in 2017, just 2 terms into her studies at Durham University, Olivia died in a senseless and wholly avoidable accident caused by the negligence of a large company. My guest, Nigel Burt, is Olivia's father. The charity he and his wife Paula set up in memory of their daughter's deep impact on the people around her is called Olivia Inspires. In its first 5 years, the charity has contributed £110,000 towards changing the lives of 600 young people by helping children and teenagers living in the New Forest area to realise their potential. In 2023, Olivia Inspires was voted New Forest Charity of the Year. The terrible pain and grief that Nigel and Paula have suffered in the wake of their horrific loss was made all the harder to bear by the company responsible for the accident refusing to accept that responsibility. After a 5-year-long fight for justice and a 3-week-long trial, the company was finally convicted under the Health and Safety Act of failure to ensure the safety of its customers and fined £1.5 million. I've asked Nigel here today to share the story of what happened and what has helped him get through it. There are lessons here for us all.
Well, we brought Olivia up to be hopefully a sensible young person, and she was really funny. She even wore a helmet when she went out cycling on her bike. Yeah, she had her head screwed on, and she was very sensible indeed. And when this happened, I think it's everyone's worst nightmare. And I think it's one of those there for the grace of God moments that sends a shiver running down people's backs, because you bring your children up to be the best they can be, and then you send them out into the world. And when this happened to Olivia, it really was one of those moments that is almost incomprehensible. And lots of you hear of lots of people dying from sort of almost banal things. They die from illnesses, car crashes, all sorts of things. But I don't know, it was almost the incomprehensibility of what happened to Olivia that made it doubly awful, really.
Unimaginable, Nigel, I think, for anyone who hasn't experienced what you did. And I wonder if you could tell us what happened.
Well, Olivia was at Durham University. She did a lot of sailing, and she'd been sailing ever since she was 5 years old. And when she went to university, she continued on with her sailing, and she went out with her friends one evening to a club because she loved to dance, and she had lots of friends, and they were queuing to get into the club. There were lots more people there than normal because one of the other venues in the city centre was closed for some reason, and basically there were too many people there, and the club people had no idea how they should control them. And Olivia and her friends were told to queue alongside some metal barriers that delineated the outside queuing area from the smoking area, which was sort of within the club premises. And so she was lined up along there with her friends, and there were lots of people there as well. And these barriers were freestanding, interlinked heavy metal panels, and somehow they just fell down. And I don't think anyone really understands what actually happened, but suffice to say, Olivia ended up underneath the barriers. she was just killed, and nobody else was hurt, just Olivia.
Have you ever wondered why her?
All the time. Yeah, and I think one of the most destructive questions you can possibly ask yourself is, why and what if? What if she hadn't been stood exactly where she was? What if this? What if that? And the why? It's they don't get you anywhere, and they just eat you up. And yeah, but you can't help asking yourself those questions. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference, because what happened, and none of it will bring Olivia back.
And yet, I imagine it must be quite difficult not to ask them. And what I'm hearing is that they did at least cross your mind for a while. And as you said, kind of all the time, perhaps for a while. So how did you get through that? And how did you deal with that?
Well, I don't think you really can deal with it, Sally Ann. You cannot not ask yourself those questions. You listen to the news and you hear about things happening, and you almost immediately draw parallels in your own mind with what happened to Olivia. You just do it, and you just have to live with it, and try and avoid. I think just avoid those questions.
Is that what you do, Nigel?
Yeah, it is, because I've heard other people say it. Those what ifs, whys. They ultimately don't actually get you anywhere. And if you do that too much, then it can be quite damaging. So I just try and avoid doing that to myself.
Was there a point then at which you realised this?
Really, ever since it happened, the sort of, from that day in 2018, we've sort of had to face a series of challenges, and I've really focused on each of those challenges, overcoming them, and then moving on, and tried to avoid asking those questions of myself as much as possible. So really, I've sort of been focusing on the challenges that the search for justice and accountability, overcoming those challenges.
It sounds to me as if it's, if I may, I hope not oversimplify, but focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't.
Absolutely, yeah. Because as I said, you can't do anything about the what ifs and those sorts of questions. So I have really just focused on the very difficult challenges we faced in getting accountability for what happened to Olivia. And that focusing on that has really been a distraction in many ways.
I can understand, I think. And the fight for justice, which took 3 long years.
Actually, more like five, to be honest.
More like 5, and 3 weeks in court, finally, before the settlement. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it's been a very long and protracted time. And, right from the very beginning, when we went up to Durham and we met the senior investigating officer at Durham Police, a superintendent, and who said basically, it's an unfortunate accident, and terribly sorry, and that's it. And we just weren't prepared to accept that in this day and age, a young person can go out with her friends and not come back. That isn't something you shrug your shoulders and move on from. And as I said, we weren't prepared to accept it, and so we did everything we could to change the police attitude in what had happened, and have it investigated properly.
And was there a part of this that was about stopping it ever happening again?
Obviously, yes, but that's really secondary to what we were looking for, which really was accountability and justice for Olivia. So and clearly, if that can stop other things, this happening to other young people, then that can only be a good thing. But really, the complete focus was on justice and accountability.
And as I listen to this, I feel kind of seeds of anger kind of within me, even though I obviously don't have the direct experience. So I can imagine that anger, Nigel. And is there a sense when you look back that kind of made you even more determined, like fueled it, so to speak?
I know there were moments of anger, yeah. Particularly at the end when the trial was going on. But as we went through the whole legal process, there were other moments that did make me incredibly angry. Being lied to by people in power who had control over what was happening was incredibly frustrating, and it's horrendous. What people do if they think they can get away with it, and it's a salutary lesson, I think. For example, one of the lawyers in the Crown Prosecution Service, just blatantly lied to us, and these things shouldn't happen. And the people who do that need to realise the effect that their lies actually have on people. So yes, there were times, but most of the time it was really just here's a challenge to overcome. Focus on overcoming it, and then move on to the next one.
Take it step by step, so to speak. So in those moments when you knew someone was blatantly lying, like this person in authority who's supposed to be representing justice, or at least looking at the world through that lens, and they were lying, what did you do or say?
Well, there's very little mileage in challenging them, because they're not going to admit it or really do anything about it. So the only thing you can do is look at how to really move around them. And I mean, in that particular case, we were fortunate to have the support of our local member of parliament who took up the battle and helped us really move things forward. Because, as I said, if you run into a brick wall, you're not going to go through it. So you've got to find a way to go around it.
Well, indeed, but again, I'm sitting here listening to this and thinking, my goodness, whilst what you say is completely true, and I couldn't agree with it more. Little point in hitting your head against the brick wall, right? Let's find the way through it, around it. What resources do we have that we can call upon to get the outcome we want? Right, I get that. Very pragmatic, focusing on what you can do. And I'm thinking, gosh, to be able to do that with all the emotions that inevitably you must have been, they're there, even if perhaps you weren't feeling them in the moment. I don't know, I'm not in your skin, but just imagining, Nigel, being able to keep your head that cool in such an extraordinarily kind of emotive situation.
A lot of my working life has been involved in, should we say, sort of quite challenging situations. Being in charge of media relations during the Gulf War was very, very stressful, having to deal with some pressurized and emotional situations at times, and also afterwards working for a major oil company, some very difficult situations. So really, I just sort of almost switched to my sort of, even though I'd been retired a short while, just switched to sort of work mode, and really it was all about just problem solving and just getting through it.
And those skills, I suppose, competencies, whatever, that you'd acquired and developed over your professional life became helpful. You knew they worked. You knew how to do them.
Yeah, absolutely, and also very importantly, the contacts I'd made over the years as well, because on your own, there's a very limited amount you can achieve, but with a network around you, you can achieve so much more.
So you knew the outcome you wanted. You wanted justice. You saw a way forward and you knew what kind of help you needed to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that we needed very good legal help, and in that respect, we were fortunate to have an excellent legal team, and we were advised by friends that from work who we should be looking at, and also, as I said, also we were helped by our local members of parliament as well, and all of this really just enabled us to move on towards the objective. Obviously, there were ups and downs along the way, and some of those downs were pretty tough. Thankfully, we got, I guess, the outcome we wanted at the end. But that it doesn't bring Olivia back, but it's some small recompense.
Indeed. Yes, I was thinking perhaps of asking you at the end of it all, if there ever is an end, but when you got to that point where you'd achieved that outcome, how did you feel?
To be honest, the very end, just huge relief, because it was the culmination of five years of fighting, and the court experience. If you haven't been in court, is very traumatic. And in Olivia's case, I mean, there were people in the jury who were crying. It was very difficult to go through. And when Olivia's friends who had been with her on that night, were brought back to give evidence, was awful to meet them. And it wasn't just Olivia that was hurt that night. There was a number of young lives that were blighted, and some of those young people, who were lovely young people, were still deeply traumatized, and it's not really surprising.
Yes, that's an aspect of it I hadn't considered until this moment, is calling the witnesses, and what the impact of that on them must have been extremely difficult for you, I guess, to do, but it was necessary, right?
Well, because the club's owners, Stonegate, chose to plead not guilty. That was really the only way to do it. The witnesses had to be called, and they had to relive what happened, and it was very, very difficult for them. I mean, they'd been traumatized once, that night in February 2018, and just to re-traumatize them again was really unforgivable. And actually, one of the witnesses, who was the head of security at the club, I was coming out of court at the end of the day when he gave evidence, and he was waiting there, and I sort of saw him, and I thought, oh dear. And he came up to me, and he said he was really sorry, but he had to talk to me, and he said how deeply sorry he was about what had happened, and because he had tried to resuscitate Olivia, and he had to give up his work in security because he couldn't go on doing it, and he was desperately sad about what had happened. So it wasn't just Olivia's friends that this affected; it was everyone who was there. This chap, who was a big chap you can imagine, as head of security at a club, was crying, and just asked to hug me. And when these things happen, they affect so many people.
And if you hadn't moved forward in the way you did, you'd never have known that.
No, you're right. But we had to. So that was never really an option.
No. And then I suppose these were surprising revelations that came along the way.
That was, we'd spoken to Olivia's friends, in the intervening period when the security man came up, that I had no idea whatsoever.
No, that must have been extraordinary, particularly as when you saw him approaching, you were thinking, oh no, and then something completely different happened.
Yeah, totally. I was shocked, touched. It was just very emotional.
I'm wondering, not because I see it as your responsibility at all, But thinking of the young people coming forward to bear witness to the event of that night, the events of that night, did you feel any sense of wanting to take care of them? How did that work? I'm thinking of them, I suppose. What happened for them?
I mean, it's very difficult because yes, you want to, and and I think we've done everything we can to help them. We've stayed in touch, and some of them message us and talk to us, but it's just very difficult. And I think some of them are just sort of wanting to just move on with their lives and just almost put that in a box and just move on.
Yeah, everyone has different ways of dealing with such matters, such things, such traumatic events in life, whatever they may be. Everyone's different, right? I guess in my experience of different kinds of trauma in the stories that I hear and the work that I do, it's often, I suppose, listening for what's needed, because how can you know until you listen to what people need and do your best to respond, I guess.
That's all you can do. I don't think there's not some sort of magic bullet. It's just take things as they come, I guess, is all you can do.
And how does that feel to do that?
Well, somebody said to me, that grief stays with you all the time, and when things first happen, grief is all encompassing. It stays the same, but then you build other things around it. So we've had people who, frankly, should have known better and saying, "Oh, are you feeling better now?" "Oh, yes, I've had a nasty cold, thank you, and I'm recovered now." And these are supposedly intelligent people, and no, it's something that's always with you, but you just try and sort of build new things around it. And part of that was the starting the charity.
Indeed, which has been, by any standard, extremely successful, hasn't it? And can you tell us a bit more about that, Nigel, how that got started, where the idea came from, how you set it up?
Well, really, you obviously didn't know Olivia, but everyone who met her sort of said what an amazing young woman she was. And as a parent, I would say she was amazing, but it's almost when you meet other people and they say that, a friend of mine from the Navy days, he was Dean of Engineering at Bath University, and Olivia went for an interview and she met Gary. And Gary said afterwards that what an amazing young woman she was. And there aren't many prospective students who interview him.
How did he do?
But yes, so she could speak to anyone as an equal, and she just had a particular gift for just getting on with people, and there are a lot of really bright people who are very happy to trample on other people to get to where they're going, but Olivia wasn't one of those people. She was somebody who always wanted to bring people with her on her journey. And because of that, that's why we just felt it was so wrong that Olivia wasn't around anymore, wasn't in the world, and that when people go, they can just be forgotten. There's nothing to remember them by. People only really die when people stop talking about them. And we wanted for that not to happen to Olivia. And so we thought, we could set up a charity, not having ever had any experience of these things. But we looked around and talked to people who had founded charities of a similar sort of nature, and talked to them about how they had done it, and really, just took a leap of faith and did it. So and we had no idea how it would go. Obviously, you don't, because I mean, a charity is just like a business. It's absolutely no different. And I guess we didn't have any idea how successful or otherwise it was going to be. I mean, perversely, we set it up just before COVID struck, which was inspirational timing. But in some ways, it actually was quite good, because we'd got started and it enabled us to have an enforced pause to look at what we were doing and tweak it somewhat. But once again, with the charity, it's all been about building a strong network of people to help us achieve what we want to do, both in getting young people to come to us for support, and also people who will help us in running the charity in many different ways, because it's just Paul and myself who actually run the charity, and on our own we couldn't really do that much, but with a really big network around us, we've been able to achieve probably much more than we ever thought we might.
And so you've, again, built your resources, got the right people on board, so to speak, got the support you need and the engagement, I guess, that you need, just like a business, just like, make anything else work. And you're supporting, you raise a lot of money, as I've understood it, to support children and young people, young adults, teenagers, right up to the age of 18, I think, isn't it? So can you tell us a story, if you can pick one out from all of the hundreds, maybe more, of the people you've helped? Is there one story that stands out for you?
Well, actually, there's a couple who are very similar in actual fact. And one of the things we've been doing for some years now is funding a 2-year vocational course in traditional woodland management skills. And it's led by a chap who, he comes from a social work background, so he's very good with troubled young people. And the first group that we had go through this course were from a local comprehensive school in Lymington, in the New Forest. And they were young people who were on the edge of being permanently excluded from school. I spoke to the headmaster, and he described them as semi-feral.
Great description. Yeah.
And the education system is great up to a point in this country, but there are quite a number of young people who don't sort of fit the mold of doing the national curriculum, and they do not want to be sat in a classroom doing double geography. They want to be outdoors. They see their future working with their hands, doing practical things in the outdoors, and the school system does not really cater for them. And the trouble then is that a lot of young people, if they're not interested, if they're not being given what they want, then they'll talk to their friends, mess about, be labelled as troublemakers, and then ultimately fail in the education system, and beyond that be a burden to society rather than being somebody who contributes to society. So the course take these young people, they do the course and they really enjoy it. I think we've only had, over the 4 or so years that we've been doing, I think we've had one dropout, but the course fits them for a college course in any range of areas, such as woodland management, agricultural science, all sorts of sort of land-based areas. So these two, they went through the course, and they were the first tranche of young people that we had. And I've just heard from Paul, who runs the course for us, that one of those 5 is now working as an agricultural contractor, going all around the country, driving these huge tractors that you see that have got more technology on them than the space shuttle. And another one is a tree surgeon, and he's going all around the country and also abroad working as a tree surgeon. So these are young people who, as I said, were borderline permanent exclusion from school, who are now got the dream jobs they wanted, and perhaps they would not have done that if we hadn't been able to help them achieve that.
So you gave them the foundation they needed. And I guess also the direction, the sense that I'm making some assumptions here, but that they might have started to believe what they were being told. And then you gave them, enabled them to realize that wasn't at all true.
Yeah, absolutely. a lot of young people who fail in school are labelled as failures, and they're told they're failures, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If people tell you, you're going to amount to nothing all your life, then surprise, surprise, when you don't.
Particularly when you're young, and I mean, some people do manage to rise above all of that nonsense, but a lot of people don't, and they do believe what they're told, and that's such a sad thing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And, the great thing about, the course is, even if they don't end up going to college and, doing some land-based course, then, they still have amassed a load of skills that, will help them in life, and they've succeeded. And that's really, really important. They've learned things like team working, turning up on time, all sorts of quite valuable things that to you and me seem pretty trivial, but in reality, and actually not that.
Oh, they're life skills, aren't they? I'm a terrible timekeeper, actually, but I try. Despite 23 years in the Navy, I'm really bad. But I recognise it as an important life skill, and obviously when I have to, I do it. And so these are basic things that I suppose, if we were being critical of the British education system, we might say ought to be deeply embedded, and perhaps they are. I mean, I'm a bit out of touch, but your experience is more relevant and current, and this is what you're seeing, and this is the hope that you're giving to the young people who might otherwise have been set apart in some way and not able to contribute. And I'm wondering, and I'm hearing it, and I'm almost seeing it in my mind, that the heart of all of this, is Olivia and her spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as I said, we set up the charity so that Olivia wouldn't be forgotten about, and through the achievements of these young people, and also all the people who support us through fundraising and all of that, Olivia is remembered, and people still come up to me and say, "Oh, you may not know this, but I met Olivia," and they tell me some story about when they met Olivia, which is lovely and surprising at the same time.
Isn't it interesting, Nigel? There are things that we can know, things that we orchestrate, that that we can make happen, and then there are the surprises like that come out of nowhere, right?
Totally, totally. I mean, I went to a youth forum meeting a little while ago, and everyone went round the table doing the sort of who I am bit, and this lady who was head of the local community association, she paused and said, "Nigel, you may not know this, but I coordinate all the volunteers at our local hospice." And she said, I had the pleasure of interviewing Olivia to volunteer at Oakhaven, and what a wonderful young woman she was. That, as I said, just knock you back a bit when they come at you out of nowhere.
And to know that she's alive in the minds and memories of so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. We're shortly going to be going up to Durham University for a charity dinner where Olivia's going to be remembered, and it's lovely that the students at Durham, even though the ones who are there now never actually met Olivia, they are remembering her, and indeed some 30 or 40 of them are going to be running a half marathon to raise funds for Olivia's charity, which is fantastic.
Nigel, here we are, or here you are 6-7 years on from that tragic evening. When you look forward, look ahead to the rest of your life, and who knows how long that will be for any of us, right? But when you attempt to look forward, what does fearless forward mean to you?
I guess during the years of seeking justice and accountability, as I've said, it was such a huge task. You couldn't just sort of say, "I'm here and there's the end where we want to get to." You just had to almost break it down into a series of problems that got you to where the solution of which got you to where you want. So it's very much a day at a time, because to look at it in its entirety would be overwhelming. You'd just collapse and achieve nothing. And I guess to a large extent, I still take things very much, a day at a time, and there is no grand plan. I'm afraid. I wish I could sit here and say, yes, in that cliched interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? The answer is I don't. I just sort of say, take things a day at a time, and there is no grand plan.
You know what, Nigel? That sounds like pretty sound advice to me. At the end of the day, what else can you do?
Well, certainly in our situation, I think it is the only advice I could give, and it's just take things in manageable pieces and don't be overwhelmed by what's facing you.
In circumstances such as this, why and what if are some of the most destructive questions you can ask. As Nigel put it, if you let them, they can eat you up. They're best avoided. Grappling with almost overwhelming grief, Nigel forced himself to focus on the challenges of the day ahead, and there were plenty of those. Drawing on skills he'd developed over his whole working life, he sought out the expert help he needed and courageously and determinedly overcame every block to the justice and accountability he sought for Olivia's death. It was an overwhelmingly huge task, which Nigel broke down into a series of problems he could tackle one by one. He realised there was no magic bullet for this. It was about staying the course. Founding the charity was a similar project, requiring the same leadership and management skills as any other business. What mattered most in all of this was that Olivia was not forgotten, and through the charity founded in her name, her spirit of inspiring others to be their best will live on. People only die when people stop talking about them, Nigel said, and that is up to those of us lucky enough to be alive. Thank you for listening. Fearless Forward is edited and produced by Mark Steadman. I'll be back with you in 2 weeks for our next conversation about how leaders have faced their fears. To be sure of catching it, go to fearlessforward.org, activate push notifications from your favourite podcast source, or subscribe to my weekly bulletin at skillfulleaders.com.